Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Chrome Apps Office Hours. We've got a special Chrome Apps Office Hours, that's a mouthful to say, always, today, where we've brought in two special guests, the developers behind Reddit, the Redditor app. So, guys, let me bring you up and say welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for introducing us there. And yeah, as you said, we developed an app called Redditor. It's a really cool app, we think, and it lets you basically browse Reddit on your desktop in a neat column-based design, as you can see here. So, Dimitri, you want to explain maybe a bit about our app?
Well, basically, what's nice about the columns is that it serves as a feed of all the data that you like any custom feed that you want from Reddit. So you could have like a custom search feed, multiple subreddit feed, and it will pull like if you have it sorted by new, it'll pull in the new posts over an interval, and it'll be like kind of a live experience of Reddit.
Very cool. And so this is something that you guys have been working on for quite a while, haven't you? Or how long have you guys been working on this?
Since October, well, we released October of last year, so yeah, we've been working a little bit over a year now.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is something that you guys have built. Did it start off as a Chrome packaged app, or where did you start with it? Where were you sort of doing it in the very beginning?
It's kind of a funny story, actually, because Dimitri and I came home from school one day, and Dimitri said, "I'm bored. I want to make a really cool Reddit client."
Okay.
And then I said, "Oh, cool. Good luck with that." And then Dimitri started looking into developing in like Qt, so,
Yep.
C++ using like the Qt framework. And I frowned at Dimitri and said, "Well, why do it in Qt when you have this beautiful HTML5 to design this rich experience in?" So probably for the next month after like we decided we'd do it in HTML5, we were looking for something like a way to publish our app because we don't want to make a boring website. We want to make like a full desktop app.
Yep.
So we were looking at maybe Zool Runner with Firefox, and Appcelerator had a really cool way to publish desktop apps in HTML5. But we stumbled upon the Chrome App Store, and we really fell in love with that just because of like the rich API they give us, and it's just so easy to make an app
Yep.
using the Chrome API.
So that was about a year or so ago, and that was with the sort of V1 Chrome packaged apps that you
Yeah.
did this. So
Yeah.
what did you like about the Chrome packaged app platform at the time that sort of said, okay, yeah, this is definitely where we want to go with this? What were some of the key things?
Well, first of all, it was just very easy. It just felt really easy to distribute through the Chrome Web Store. So it was kind of new. So it was nice to be like one of the early, I guess,
Yep.
maybe a year isn't too early, but still.
We're just two guys, and we don't have any marketing experience at all. We're first-year university students, so we had no way of like going up to all these people and saying, "Here, guys, here's our app. We hope you enjoy it."
Yep.
So the Chrome Store, that really kind of like eliminated that problem for us because we just put the app right on the Chrome Store, and then instantly whoever searches Reddit on the store, they'll see Redditor, and they'll get it that way. So it sort of levels the playing field in that sense because big companies who publish apps onto the store, they have the same chance of people finding their apps
Right.
as just two kids have of people finding our own app. So
Yeah.
that's what we're really excited about with the Chrome Store.
Cool. So as we're going through today, I just put the link up on screen, but for those of you who are watching at home live and if you have questions, feel free to post your questions to our Google moderator queue. The URL is just there at goo.gl/KNZ or KNZHF, and that H is a capital. And so shout out to you guys because you guys are in school right now, and you're in school out in the Maritimes, right? In Canada.
Yep.
Awesome. Very nice. What school are you guys at?
I'm going to Dalhousie. I'm getting a computer science degree.
Cool.
I'm going to St. Mary's University. I'm taking a mathematics and finance degree.
Awesome. Very nice. So interesting mathematics and science, or mathematics and finance, and you're doing computer science
Yeah.
stuff?
At first, it started off as a hobby, but then I just kind of grew on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That works. Awesome.
Yeah.
So as you guys started working on the V1 of your, and I guess, working on your app today, what kind of libraries and frameworks are you using to get the great app that you have?
So in terms of the third-party libraries we're using that we absolutely depend on every day, the answer is going to be jQuery, just like pretty much everyone else.
Yep.
And it just makes everything so simple.
Yep.
And we wrote our own library for interfacing with the Reddit API, just because not a really good JavaScript one had existed before. So we're heavily dependent on jQuery and then our own little library for that. Other than those two libraries, I don't really think we utilize many more, with the exception of course, like the Chrome APIs that are offered to us within the Chrome extension. So
cool. So did you guys do the design work for the experience all from scratch on your own?
In earlier versions of the app, everything was our own, but over time, we had people giving suggestions and everything like that. So we've used a lot of help from the Reddit community and everyone who's been using the app.
yeah.
Wow, that's pretty fantastic. It's really a beautiful app, and it's got a really app-like experience, which is nice to see. We see a lot of people who build Chrome packaged apps still think about apps as sort of websites, and the experience is kind of still websitey. But the point of a Chrome packaged app is that it's not. It's I can't speak today. It's an installed application that you use on your desktop computer or your laptop or wherever that just works and feels appy. And trying to define that appy experience is sometimes a little bit tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you guys were working through that app-like experience, what were some of the things that you were thinking about for creating an experience and a UI that looked and felt like an app?
So one thing that we hope users notice right off the bat is that this is something called a frameless app. It doesn't have the traditional bar along the top with the close buttons and whatnot.
Yep.
We actually built our own close, minimize, and maximize buttons in JavaScript, and we built it such that we wanted to mimic the operating system that the app's installed on.
Oh, interesting. So do you change for the different operating systems?
Yeah, that's correct. We do. So if you'll notice here, you see the Mac UI up in the top left.
Yep.
And that's just like the standard mountain lion window controls. But if you were to install this on Windows or Linux, then you'd see a completely a different experience in terms of the window controls. And that's something we do in JavaScript, and we couldn't actually do that without Chrome and the Chrome extension, like V2 package app. So.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. So yeah, that's you guys have been, I guess, for about maybe 3 weeks or so now, working on bringing this app to a V2 packaged app.
Yeah.
What has been your experience on doing that so far?
Well, so far, after we solved the cross-domain issues, it's actually been going pretty smoothly.
Awesome.
It was like the main issue is just cross-domain. As soon as we got past cross-domain, everything was just smooth as butter.
So,
transferring it over.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So one of the things we first started when we had our first conversation that we talked a little bit about is you guys had looked at this, and you had hit 4 sort of big problems, and content security policy and cross-domain was sort of the first one to mind. What was the problem there, and how did you end up solving it?
Well, the problem was with Chrome V2 package apps, they didn't let you, for example, set an SRC tag on an image that went to an external, different website. And with Reddit, and where links are shared everywhere,
right?
And you want to embed an image into the app, you can't just link it to the other website. So what we did is, anytime an image tag comes up on the app, we just add a little attribute to it, and then we search. Then with an interval, we search through the DOM for every image tag that has that attribute, and then we process it, and then we download it on the side and in the background, and then we get the blob and then stick it as an SRC tag, and then it works.
Okay, so you're effectively sort of grabbing those images. Now, are you saving them to disk, or are you just keeping them in memory, or what are you doing with them once you get them from the server?
I believe they're just stored in memory. I don't believe that they get I'm not 100% certain on that.
Okay.
Yeah, at the moment, I can tell you here. It's funny because it sounds like it's this big complicated procedure, but
Yeah.
in fact, it's about 10, 11 lines of code, so
Yeah.
it's actually not.
Yeah, it wasn't like hours of work. It was
wow.
just checking if we're in a Chrome V2 packaged app,
Right.
and then just changing like a couple lines of code. It wasn't that
cool.
difficult.
Yeah.
Cool. So content security policy is sort of one of those ones a lot of developers run into on their first try when they convert an app, and it's really about because these apps have access to APIs and hardware that web apps or the drive-by web really doesn't normally have access to. It's really important to make sure that users are well protected here, and that's why we implement these rules, so that you can't go and grab source from someplace else and start injecting it. You can't accidentally have somebody do a cross-site scripting attack where they're grabbing their source and inserting it into your app.
Yeah.
But it does mean that there's a little bit more fun. Now, one of the things that I shared with you guys early on was the Chrome Asset Loader. Did you end up using that, or did you end up doing your own thing after seeing that and going, oh, okay, we see what's going on?
Well, we saw what it was doing, and we just implemented just a slightly simpler version.
Okay.
And then that's about it. We just call one function every time we see an image, and then that's about it.
Yeah. Interesting. So what were some of the other challenges that you guys faced as you were working through porting the app over?
So the other biggest challenge that we faced was the accessibility of cookies.
Okay.
So you can't, through JavaScript, access document.cookie. It just doesn't let you.
Yep.
And it's kind of unfortunate because the API, it's dependent on cookies. So we had to build a little bit of a workaround, around logging into Reddit and authenticating with Reddit, because we didn't have access to setting cookies, for example, or even reading cookies. Right. So that didn't take that long to fix that issue either, probably only about an hour.
Yep. First we went to OAuth.
Oh, right, yeah.
First we went to OAuth thinking that we couldn't fix it, but then...
But we sent you guys an email, actually, and you came back to us and had a brilliant solution. We implemented that, so it was pretty straightforward after we got your email.
Cool. So what was that? So you were using the OAuth implementation, and when you were using that one, were you using the identity API?
No, we had written an OAuth implementation earlier on for another project.
Okay.
So since we just needed to implement this for testing reasons, we used that. But I think actually in V2 packaged apps, there's an API to interface OAuth directly, right?
Yeah, there is, and it's a relatively new API. It's still an experimental API, so if you use it today, you can't upload your app to the Chrome Web Store yet. That should come out of experimental within the next release or two. My guess is in the next release, not the one that's coming up in a couple of weeks, but the release after that. And that'll allow you to authenticate against any authentication provider, whether they're using OAuth or whatever. They can be using their own sort of magic there. And then there's a second API that lets you authenticate against the Google APIs. So for developers who want to go and authenticate up to a Google service, say for example you want to store stuff on the user's Google Drive, or you want to go and just figure out who this user is, you can use that particular API. So what was the solution you guys ended up using then?
So what we figured out was, even though we couldn't pragmatically access cookies, they were actually being set anyway. So we actually figured out that we can make a request to Reddit and then let them handle all the cookie mess for us, so we didn't have to set any cookies ourselves. And then it just sort of erased the problem.
Yeah.
So we were really lucky that they actually did that for us.
Now, when you talk to Reddit, are you doing that? How are you doing that? Because to do that cross-domain request gets a little bit interesting. Are you doing it with a sandbox iframe? Are you doing it with a web view? What's your communication process look like between your app and the Reddit API?
So every GET request is actually just a normal AJAX request, and I believe every POST request is as well. They are cross-domain requests, and we just implement the necessary restriction removal within the policy, the security policy. So For example, every time we need to access like a website URL on Reddit.com, well, within the content security policy that our app uses, it has Reddit.com within that. So it knows that we as the developers, like we know it's safe to access Reddit.com. Therefore, it's safe for the users to access Reddit.com. So
Yeah.
sort of with CSP.
Cool. Now, let's talk about some of the enhancements you guys were able to add because of some of the new features with Chrome packaged apps with the V2 stuff. Was there anything that you were able to take advantage of there to enhance the experience?
Definitely there was. For one, as I mentioned before, the frameless app. So you don't have like this bar along the top of your screen for the app.
Yep.
It's just built right into the window itself. So this just feels so native because you have the window controls built right into the actual like web view.
Yep.
So that's definitely one of the coolest things that we were able to do. And then the second thing is the fact that you could actually use Chrome storage to store user data. Now we haven't implemented like the syncing yet through Chrome. Right now we actually run off a shared web host.
Okay.
And as we get more and more users, it takes longer and longer to sync. But thanks to Google, we'll just be able to sync everything through Google and just eliminate like the necessity of having to juggle syncing by ourselves. So that's going to be the coolest thing we do.
Now, do you guys have a syncing service running somewhere that you guys maintain today?
Oh, yes. We actually use JustHost for that, just
Okay.
a shared web host.
Yep.
Because we can't afford anything really that big.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's a huge advantage, I guess, for users and being able to store like stuff between session or just between machines and sessions, so that if I'm signed in on one computer, hey, here's all my stuff. I go to another computer, all of that stuff is synced across.
Yeah.
Now, are you using both the local storage? Do you plan to use both the local storage and the sync storage, or are you just going to end up using sync storage primarily?
We'll probably make it so that like only the essential elements are synced,
Okay.
so that we're not like clogging, like putting a lot of clutter into the cloud.
Yep.
So we'll probably take advantage of both local and sync storage combination.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a limit to the amount of stuff that you can put into the sync storage. So I think it's something around like it's 512 items or 1024 items, and each one can be a maximum of like 4K or something to that extent. So you can't put, the entire world into it, but you can put a fair amount of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, a reasonable amount for a Reddit client like ours.
Yep. Exactly. Cool. And then as well with the frameless stuff, now, what did you have to change to get it to be frameless so that it didn't have the native bit across the top?
Right, so at first, when we set out to do this, we had no clue what we were doing. But actually, we just did a quick Google search on Chrome 2, V2, frameless app.
Okay.
And Google actually has like 100 different like projects and all their source visible on, I think, GitHub.
Yeah.
So one of them happened to be a frameless app.
Perfect.
So we just went ahead, we downloaded that, and to actually drag around the app, like that, it's kind of fidgety right now.
I don't think you can see it on the screen.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, you can just click and drag the app, and of course, that's something you need to implement as a developer yourself because you don't have the Chrome around the app to do that. So it's one line of CSS, and just looking at the source that Google provided, we found that out in about like 5 minutes.
That's pretty great. So what were some of the resources? You mentioned the GitHub repository, but what are some of the other resources that you found helpful in building your Chrome app?
Stack Overflow, for sure.
Okay.
A lot of hours spent there, just in general.
Yeah.
Other than that, the Google documentation is actually pretty good for V2 packaged.
Okay.
And, as I said, like the 100 different projects that you guys offer, like all the source code,
That
that's
was a lot of help.
a lot of help.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you guys are thinking about adding to this as a Chrome packaged app or just in general, feature-wise, in the future?
Well, we want to see if we can implement like an offline kind of feature where like it will cache like maybe the first like maybe 2-3 pages of each column.
Yep.
and like if you remember something that you wanted to show your friends or something, you don't have to like connect to the internet and
That's
re-download everything.
that's cool. How what APIs are you thinking about would be useful for that? How are you thinking about implementing that?
Uh, we haven't really looked enough into it to know exactly what we want to use, but
Okay.
we'll have to take a look.
Cool. Well, just off the top of my head, there's a couple I think that would be interesting. The Chrome Storage Local would be one. But there's another one that I guess there's two that are interesting. There's the synced file system, which works very much like the HTML5 file system, that allows you to store resources on the user's computer. So you can store data, you can store images, files, whatever. So you can use that. And because it's the synced file system, it actually syncs to the user's Google Drive account. So they can store stuff up there. They've got access to it on any computer they go to, and you're pretty much golden across all the different devices you may be signed in on.
Okay.
Then the other one is and I'm completely blanking on it. There was synced file system and the. All right, I'll have to come back to it because I'm blanking on it. Love those kinds of days.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what are your next steps to get this into the Chrome Web Store? What else do you guys have to do in order to publish it?
Well, there's some minor bugs with the with pulling images. Like for example, albums, they don't seem to work as well. Like the images just aren't being pulled properly, but that shouldn't be too big of a problem to fix. It's just looking at the code again.
Yeah.
What else?
Really just minor bugs that when we seed it out to some testers, they'll be able to give us some good feedback on, and we can get back to them and sort of solve their problems, hopefully.
Cool.
And then we should be actually ready to release soon.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And, from the time you guys started working on the V2 app to getting something working, how long do you think that took all total? Just to get it working, not necessarily to have it perfect, but like, all right, this is working.
Within less like within a week, it wasn't that.
Cool. And then
that difficult. It was just changing some manifests, some spots in the manifest, and really that's really about it. And some cross. It was purely CSP.
Okay. So yeah. CSP was really the big thing. And then to get it to that like place where you're going to be happy with it, how long do you think it would take you? Has taken you to get to that stage?
Just in raw hours of just pure coding.
Yeah, sure.
Probably only like 8 hours, considering that we also added additional features there as well to make the experience better for the user. So not long at all.
Awesome. That's actually pretty fantastic. And it helps, I think, for developers who are watching this and considering building or porting their app from a V1 packaged app or a web app, that seeing real developers say that this is what it takes, and this is a great app. Like this offers a full set of features, has a really nice experience, really says a lot about this experience in moving this forward. Have you guys thought about monetization strategies? Like, do you plan to make some money with this, or is going to use this to pay for school, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely on our minds, but we're not 100% sure how we're going to do it with the desktop. But we're also planning on moving on to mobile platforms, and we're actually in the process of doing that right now.
Okay.
So hopefully, either through like I think it was like a freemium model. I forgot what the model was called, but there's free and a free version with ads, and then one that's paid that doesn't have any. But we're not 100% certain with the desktop version.
Okay. Well, certainly the freemium is an interesting model. We're getting ready to release in-app payments to allow users to pay, within the app a certain amount of money. So maybe that means unlocking a certain set of features. But actually, you mentioned mobile. Let's talk about that for a sec. How are you approaching the mobile app? What are you doing to build a mobile experience?
It's funny you mention that, actually, because right now we have a fully functional HTML5 mobile version.
Awesome.
And it's actually Yeah, it's built for Firefox OS.
Okay.
It runs pretty well on Firefox OS actually. Like it was really fun to make.
Sweet.
But in terms of Android development, we're doing that in Java, and for the iPhone, we're doing that in Objective C.
Okay.
Like the reason being, mostly actually, we just want to sort of like learn more about
another skill set.
Yeah.
Nice to have.
Interesting. Okay. For the Android and for the iOS versions that you're doing native, are you using web views at all to render any of the content, or are you doing everything purely native?
Well, for article previews, so if someone linked to like a New York Times article,
Yep.
We would use a web view for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But everything else is a
Everything
native
else,
piece.
yeah.
Wow, that's a great learning experience. I'll be interesting to hear how you guys, as you get further along in this project, see how these how they compare, right? And then maintaining multiple code bases across different platforms. One of the things we hear a lot from developers is that it is a pain to maintain all those code bases.
Especially with only 2 people, it's already getting pretty hectic.
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about with Chrome apps is the ability to be able to take your existing Chrome app and wrap it with Cordova, which is also known as PhoneGap, and be able to have a fully fledged version that works for mobile, whether phone, tablet, Android, iOS, without having to change, very much code, right? Like realistically, you'll need to change a few things because a screen this big doesn't necessarily work so well on a screen this big. But that's potentially just some CSS changes depending on how things are laid out. So that's certainly something to look at if you guys ever hit the point where you're like, oh, we want to keep maintaining this, but not do 3 different versions. Cool. Well, guys, we're almost at time. Is there anything you guys want to add, or anything you want to share with the folks who are watching live right now?
Well, if you want to follow our progress on like any of our developments, either mobile or the Chrome version, you can visit our subreddit, which is just reddit.com/r/Redditor. Our Twitter is just Redditor, and our website is just redditor.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let me pop that up on screen so that folks can see it there. So, if you want to try or grab Redditor, you can grab it from that URL that's there on screen. And it'll be up hopefully very shortly in the Chrome Web Store, the new version. The current one works beautifully, but it is a Chrome packaged app v1. So hopefully we'll see v2 in there in the near future. Well, guys, thanks very much for joining us, or joining me. Hopefully this was useful for folks who are watching, and you guys all learned a little bit. And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
See you guys.
Bye.
See ya.